man-made or not, one of the worst disasters in human history. And we are genuinely less prepared for the next one than the last one.
It's not one of the worst disasters in human history. I could name 100 worse ones.
Fair enough,
Okay.
but it was bad. I didn't enjoy it.
Let's not be purple.
It was a
about
bad.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, Bill Maher brought on this woke idiot, Ezra Klein, onto his show, Real Time with Bill Maher, and absolutely demolished him in front of his live studio audience. As Ezra Klein started to bring up many woke talking points, and at one point, Bill Maher has had enough and had to shut him down, put him in his place, and educate him on the truth of the matter. And it's really good watching Bill Maher, I had to burp, really good watching Bill Maher go to this change of heart as he's starting to shut people down who are extremely woke and spew a lot of common sense on Real Time with Bill Maher and his podcast. And it's good not just because he's educated in these woke idiots, but he's educating his audience at the same time who stuck by him whenever he was being, a woke idiot himself during 2020 to, 2023. I mean, let's just get into this clip here where Bill Maher absolutely annihilates his woke idiot live on Real Time with Bill Maher.
The host of the Ezra Klein Show podcast and the co-author of the book Abundance, Ezra Klein. And he writes the Weekly Dish newsletter and hosts the podcast, The Dishcast with Andrew Sullivan. Andrew Sullivan. Okay, here are the questions. Andrew, what do you think of news that British intelligence knew COVID was a lab leak in 2020 and officially ignored their report?
Not just knew, aided a 95% certainty. Same with the German intelligence service. March 2020. There's a new book out called COVID's Wake. I was reading it this last couple of weeks, and the core paper that killed off any idea that this was a lab leak in China, the proximal origin paper, which was produced with Fauci and Collins of the NIH and NIAID helping it along, was a lie. A conscious lie, that the people who looked at it, we now have their emails, are saying in the very first days of looking at the virus, this looks very man-made to us. This is so friggin' obvious this is man-made. Well, so friggin' obvious, one of them said. And then they wrote the report saying there is no evidence that this was made in a lab. The question is why? Why would they lie to us about that? And they did.
Well, I can give you one answer, the New York Times. The New York Times said any questioning of this being from a lab was racist, which always struck me as odd because it seems much more racist to go, wow, these people are eating bats?
I know.
I mean, it's just one example, but a good example of why people lost faith in the left, because they do stupid things like that. Not to be an I told you so, but from the very beginning, I was saying this shouldn't even be political, but it's at least a 50-50 it came from the lab, and that in 50 years, I can't imagine people going, wait, you mean in 2020, there was this thing that escaped from a lab in Wuhan, that started in Wuhan, and there was a lab in Wuhan that was studying it? And they didn't think that was connected, and they blamed it on bats, really? It just doesn't make any sense.
It makes a little bit more sense.
You can gaslight people so easily.
Yes, I don't.
And the scary part is, back during this time, I mean, I don't know if Bill Maher is saying exactly this, but he definitely wasn't saying that with this much conviction. Even though a lot of us were saying exactly what Bill Maher is saying right now, there is an entire 50% of the country that would call you insane or a whack job. And honestly, there's probably still 15 to 20% more of the country that will still call you insane if you said exactly what Bill Maher is saying right now. And a lot of us did, and a lot of us who accepted that fact during this time, they were saying 50% of the country is a complete, idiot, and, the rest of them accepted this logical fact and way of thinking, which is what Bill Maher is saying. And I have to dance around certain words, you know how that works. But a lot of them now would accept the fact that there are still some parts of the country, some people who will say, no, you're lying, it didn't come from the lab, and they'll say that with full conviction, and that's scary to me, right? That's the scary part to accept, and there's a massive portion of the country that are just unwilling to accept basic facts of reality, and that's even scarier, and that's really the black pill, because for every single Bill Maher that's able to accept facts and change his position on things, there's hundreds of people, thousands of people that are not willing to do that. They're just going to stay within their cult, their echo chamber, and never change, never, leave their opinion behind. I mean, you guys can let me know in the comments below what you think, but it just sounds crazy to me and radical.
Democrats are so much as fault as scientists who went along with this, knowing better. It's their integrity I'm concerned about, to actually lie and distort what they could see with their own eyes because they were afraid of politics. The other question is this. This lab was a gain of function lab. That means they were creating viruses, dangerous viruses, to figure out how to protect you from them. This gain of function research was always dangerous. Everyone knew it was dangerous. A long time ago, you go back to 2015, you will find a big meeting in London where they say there's one lab in the world most likely to have a problem with this, Wuhan. Do you know who was the biggest supporter of gain-of-function research for the last 30 years? Anthony Fauci. Anthony Fauci. Now, remember that name. There's a reason he was given a pardon back to 2014. There is something very wrong going on here.
You know? Yeah, I also don't think he did it for nefarious reasons. There's an argument to be made. There's an actual intellectual debate to be had. Should gain-of-function research be done? We want to get ahead of viruses. The other answer is, the other response would be, it's too dangerous. Because if it gets out, it's going to be bad. And that's what happened. But I don't think he's an evil guy, like some people do, who was trying to get rich off this.
No.
Okay, he just made the wrong call.
No, he knew from the get-go that the Wuhan lab had security levels that were the average of a dentist's office. They should have been at the highest level imaginable. He knew that. Not only that,
he made the wrong call.
The NIH and NID had helped fund it.
Right.
That's not really making the wrong call. You know, if we're being the most charitable we could possibly be, like, that's extreme incompetence. You know, that's not really making the wrong call. If it's like saying, you know, weigh the options. I was 50-50. I just had to go with my gut. I was wrong. That's not what happened at all. Like, they're saying here the security measures at that lab work in the dirt, in the ground. And when they're doing this function research, that should have been maximum security, maximum cleanliness. The quality assurance team should have been all over this virus, making sure it doesn't get out. And if Fauci is like, oh, it's fine, that's not making the wrong call, that's extreme, you know, incompetence for being the most, if we're being the most charitable here we could possibly be. I kind of think it was worse, and personally, but you know, it's up for you to decide in the comments, please. You know, let me know.
Down in history as the person who helped develop the virus that killed millions of people. You want to go down as the one who saved millions of people. That was at stake, a reputational matter.
A piece of a lot of this that seems insane to me is we are now years after, whether man-made or not, one of the worst disasters in human history. And we are genuinely less prepared for the next one than the last one.
It's not one of the worst disasters in human history. I could name 100 worse ones.
Fair enough, but it was bad. I didn't enjoy it.
I mean, let's not be purple.
It was a bad pandemic. Let's put it that way.
A lot worse.
As pandemics,
genuinely not my point on this. I'm happy to see. I'm happy to see that the Holocaust was worse than the pandemic. I think it's fine. But in other things, other countries, in this country, right? After something terrible happens, you often have these big bipartisan commissions that come up with a bunch of recommendations and try to create preparedness for next time. I sort of agree with you that we've gone way too far on airport security for too long, but we did a lot on things like biosecurity that made sense and actually did make us safer.
Yeah.
And we have anti-learned lessons, right? On the one hand, we had amazing success with things like...
Do you guys think that airport security has gone too far? Because personally, you know, I don't trust being at big crowds anymore with how many shootings and stabbings, you know, happen, weird stuff happens, man. I just don't trust being in crowds at all anymore, because I said, I'm gonna go into a place that's super crowded. I want maximum security. If I'm not allowed to leave, to have a weapon in the place, I want to be sure that nobody else can have a weapon in the place. And I think that airport security is fine. I stand by it. You know, there's metal detect everybody, bomb check who you want, and that's just me. And I would rather just have a metal detector in a damn movie theater if I have to. I got nothing to hide, man. I'm gonna enjoy a movie, go about my business. But if you're somebody that has something to hide, you know, I would say, oh, maximum security, please, on crowded areas, because people just can't be trusted nowadays. They really can't. You know, they're insane, mental illness, they're going psycho, they chalk it up, they're doing crazy stuff, digging in their butts and wiping it on Teslas, dude. It's just insane time to be alive right now. And I don't want to be around those people in crowds and you know, and not be able to be secure from them. I'm not sure how they feel, but that's just kind of my take on it.
speed, and now you got RFK Jr. running HHS. On the other hand, a bunch of huge mistakes are made on things like lockdowns, and we're just arguing about them. We haven't put out, say, a new best practices, right? Gain of function research, which y'all were just talking about, it is just an argument. It's something I try to keep paying attention to, and they haven't come out with strong new guidelines. Bird flu, everybody I read who knows what they're talking about says we are in a terrible position on bird flu if it actually begins to mutate and make the jump. We just have never figured out a way to find a policy equilibrium here, as opposed to sort of keep rehabbing the argument. The arguments are important.
Because everything gets politicized.
But everything gets politicized. We don't have the capacity to come to agreements. It's really bad that we are this unprepared now.
But that's why the integrity of science is so important.
I agree with you on
If
that.
we don't trust the scientists, who on earth are we going to trust?
That's really a great point. 100% facts there. You know, science and big pharma, they've made us not trust them at all. And I think that's mainly the reason why I don't trust them, is not even because obviously it is, you know, in part two of the lockdown and mishandling of that whole situation, which can't be named. But more importantly to me, it's the fact that anybody that spoke out against any sort of scientist or had an opinion on to speak on some of this, you know, they would speak on the mainstream narrative. They were shunned from the community. They were shut down, banned off the platform, silenced. A lot of reputable people were, you know, shunned and silenced, not able to even form an opinion. And that's the part that maybe not trusted at all, because if you're someone who really believes that what you're saying is true and, you know, is going to hold weight and value against scrutiny, you're not going to be someone who has to shut the other side down to prove yourself right and censor the arguments against you. You'll be able to respond accordingly and say, here's why you're wrong. It's that simple. If a side is trying to censor the other side, they probably are also in the wrong. You spoke about multiple times, and that's what maybe, you know, made me distrust a lot of stuff that comes out now, science-wise, in the news. You know, hope you all enjoy this. This is it for me today, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.